Okay, we're in. Cool. So, but you got, Jason's got all the ice fishing houses there,
Oh, he's got
ready to roll.
Good Lord, there's more ice fishing equipment at this house than there is regular fishing equipment. I guarantee that. Huh?
You got the auger and all that?
Oh, heck, auger. They have ice houses in the driveway. Like, they're not really ice houses. They're mobile homes on wheels with holes in the floor and satellite TV and beds that, extend out just like a camper, RV camper. And,
does someone bring them propane? Like, do they have like a propane service and a dump service?
Actually they do. You can, that's one of the things Jason does is he runs around and services his ice houses, and he'll bring them propane in the middle of the night and keep the heat on. And they'll have a line in the water all night long, and fish will bite in the middle of the night, and a little dinger goes off, and I don't know, kind of crazy.
I mean, I hate that we're talking about this in June now.
It's kind of refreshing.
But
I'll tell you what, it kind of felt like winter up here today, boys. It was we had I think it was 44 this morning when we put in, and it's been in the 90s up here. This is the first day I've worn pants and shoes in like a month. And water temperature dropped from the really, so I use the same front probably.
Yeah,
our water temperature dropped below 70 and big north wind, and we caught a few, so it worked out.
How do those fronts affect those fish up there? Is it just like down here, or is it?
No, I don't think they affect the fish as much here as they do home, at least my experience. Remember they're under the ice for 6 months.
Right.
They don't have time to run and hide from a cold front the way our fish down south do. I mean, it does slow the fishing down some, but I don't think it's we caught 22 today. It wasn't the end of the world. That's bug hatch, post spawn, and cold front. We caught 22. So
what was your biggest today?
Not very big. 20 inches was our biggest. I don't know what, probably 4 something. Had a lot in the 18 to 19 inch range, and then some smaller fish. So
sounds like a rough day to me.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Have you been catching them on the hair jig yet?
A few, but and it should be better than it is. Maybe I just haven't found the right hair jig spots. I don't know. I had one day, I think we had 6 on a hair jig, and today I had 1 on a hair jig. You know what? I'll throw it a lot when my clients are behind me throwing a Ned rig or whatever, and I'll throw the hair jig, just kind of stay out of the way. And I only caught 1 on it. It was just a little baby guy. So I don't know. Maybe I just probably haven't found the right little area for it, I suppose. They should be biting it. It's that time of year.
So is it similar to what we do? We use, like a deer hair, black, brown, and orange. I'm throwing an 1/8 ounce marabou black. Black is the main color. Sometimes brown is good, but black, you can't go wrong with black. And 1/8 down to a 16th. Sometimes the guys will even drift the hair jig across the rock reefs and stuff. But we mainly use it with the post spawn smallmouth, and we swim it. So you count it down and then swim it. And start out maybe 3 to 4 feet, and then swim it out to 8 or 9 with the slow and steady, right? Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and it's the funny thing with these smallmouth is if you impart action to it like you'd think of with a jig, like you should, they won't bite it. And then if you see one follow it, just slow it down. And then they'll. But yeah, no, I only caught 1 on it today, and it's a blast when they're on that thing, because you'll just be reeling along, and there's no feedback, and then all of a sudden your rod just loads up, and it's game on.
Yeah. I did really well one time. I was really surprised, but on Lake Havasu, it was in, I think, April, but I could catch them all day long on Havasu, even with it calm and sunny. And it was just, it was amazing. It's like they'd never seen a black hair jig out there. And what was weird was you'd catch a few smallmouth, but it was mainly largemouth.
You're kidding?
No. Like I say, it was in Arizona. It was wild.
I haven't been able to. I winter down in Southern Illinois, and the hair jig is something I have not been able to transfer from what I do up here to down there very well. Now I did hear
Water clarity.
No, Egypt's, the lake I fish is pretty clear. But I did hear some college guys caught some smallmouth on Kentucky Lake this last year on the hair jig. And actually one of the kids that he lives up here and he's on one of the southern teams. They were on Kentucky Lake for a college tournament, fishing the east side of Kentucky Lake. And he's like, they were struggling. He was like, well, hell, I'm just going to try this hair jig like I do at home. And they whacked them. So that was interesting. So, but that was all small.
All small mouth.
Well, let me check out these comments here before we get rolling. Everybody at home, is the audio and the video sounding good? It sounds good on our end. Just want to make sure everything is good before we go any further. We got Dave's in here. We got Jay Beffa Fishing. Got a new guy, Puddle Walkers Outdoors, man.
Welcome.
New to the Tin Horse gang. Appreciate you checking this out. Fishing with Dino. What's up, man? Got Doug from Auto Retrieve. Got Phil in here. Who else we got in here? Oh,
hey,
we
check
got
out Dave Holmes' comment.
Where is it at? Let me go back up.
It's
Right there. Hold on. Go down.
Right here?
Nope.
No?
No.
At
7:36.
Right there.
Oh, okay, here we go. Dave says, RD, my kid caught some on the black power worm today at Egypt in honor. Yes. And I fished it.
The only question was it in a brush pile? That's the one thing I miss up here.
Yeah, you're just like boulders and rocks pretty much, aren't you?
Yeah.
Very little grass.
One stick and relax.
Was there by mistake too?
We got Mo Swim Bait Slinger from Branson. Good to see you on here. Kobe Baker. Tom's in here. Eli. What's up, Eli? Good to see you on here. And let me scroll down. Bass Guy 1960. Larry's in here. This is cool. We got some new names in here. Good to see some new, fresh names in here. Appreciate you guys jumping on. And we're just talking about Ron just got off the water. He was guiding today at Mille, so we just kind of carried on the little smallmouth conversation we had. So that's cool.
Brian,
go ahead, Ron.
I'm sorry. I was just going to ask Brian, what's the next stop?
We're heading up to up north, but New York area. So we're going to be going to Champlain and then the St. Lawrence River.
There you go.
A couple of weeks. Yeah. It's when it's 90 here and you get to go up to New York, it's just beautiful country and the fishing's decent, all summer long. So it's always a treat when you get to go up north in the summertime. So I always look forward to it and hopefully catch some of those 5.5, 6 pound smallmouth. That'll be fun, especially on the St. Lawrence.
Oh, you will. That's on my bucket list. I haven't fished out there, and the guy I guided today was from Virginia, and he fishes up there a little bit. He was talking about it, so that's definitely on my bucket list.
We got Larry.
Yeah, everyone needs to go up there just once in their life. It's so picturesque and beautiful, and there's not really any big cities around. It's a great place to spend some time and some good food, and Clayton's got some pretty interesting, like the boat museum. There's other things to do besides just fishing, but the Bolt and the Singer Castle, those tours are amazing. And then the smallmouth and largemouth fishing are second to none.
Excellent.
Larry McBride says Bull Shoals Lake is still up about 30 feet. Jeez.
Yeah.
No
really?
It seems like it's like every year. It's like the new norm. They've got to keep Table Rock at a certain level, they can't flood out all the resorts and docks, and so Bull Shoals takes the brunt of that water, and it just seems like every year it's 15 to 30 feet high, and it's really changed it. It's also it's a great place to go now because you won't hardly see anyone. You can go there on a Saturday and see 4 or 5 boats all day. It's absolutely amazing. No, and it's hard to get. The fishing's been good. It gets to a point though, like now there's so much in the water. It's one of those situations where they get scattered. So you got to cover some water until you get a bite, and then you can kind of slow down. And it might be a 200 or 300 yard stretch, and you can catch quite a few. But then you go and you have to fish and fish and fish, and then all of a sudden you get into another pod or wad of them, and it takes a little bit of time in between those areas where you'll catch 10 or 15. But when the water is only 15 feet high, it can be really good. It's just now there's bushes in 30 feet of water. So that's what causes the problem. There's some out on the outside edge all the way up to when you can find a field or the bank all the way to the bank. So that seems to be the problem. But I've had some really interesting experiences with it this high, kind of like what we used to do on Gunnersville or Grass Lakes, where the hydrilla was out in that 10 or 12 foot, take a 3/4 ounce spinner bait or like a Zoom Z Swimmer 5-inch hollow belly swim bait on a 3/4 ounce head, and just reel it right above the flooded brush in say 12 to 25 feet. And it's amazing how many fish you'll catch on like a point or a little, like a drop off or something that's got right where the bushes end, and you get into that deeper water, because they're actually starting to move out to their summertime, locations. But 3/4 ounce single willow leaf spinner bait and a 5-inch Z Swimmer, really good right now when the fish start moving out at Bull Shoals. Once the flipping bite, kind of slows down, or the water gets so high, there's so much in the water, you start using that outside edge in the summertime. So it's been kind of neat to learn that, because it's almost like fishing grass, because there's buckbrush so deep in the water.
I'll be darned.
It's crazy to think, though, a couple guys from Southern Illinois, Southeast Missouri area, 30 feet high, that's deeper than some of the lakes that we fish.
Yeah, no
so kidding. We think of a high water event as 4 or 5 feet, because everything's so flat around here. Will just spread out for miles and miles and miles. And
we don't have the river system. See,
exactly. 30 feet high. That seems daunting to tackle that.
Yeah, it's impressive. You can get to places that you just never would imagine you could go.
How long has the water been up?
It's been up for a while, months.
They
not quite
in
that high. Yes, they do. Yeah. Yeah. You just, sometimes a farmer's field, any place they can get to the bank, and they've been doing that for the last few years now, because it's been so high. So the fish seem to adjust real well. And then the best thing about it is the survival rate of the fry have been so good, because they got so many places to hide. Because normally, if it's at normal level, it's just rock, So how the fry, they don't have very many places to hide. But with all the bushes, it's really helped the population on Bull Shoals. Lots of numbers. Point. And some good fish.
It really helps with their recruitment.
Yeah, right. And you see lots of, that 4 1/4. And then last year I caught one 7.5 with a friend that lives right there at Diamond City, and which is the Lead Hill area. So that's a pretty good fish for me on Bull Shoals. So you're starting to see more and more of those, and a lot of the tournaments are 20, 22 pounds for 5 fish. Really? So that's pretty good to see. Yeah.
Well, the water was high when it falls back and you got bluegill beds around your barn. That means the water is up.
Yeah, that's when the water's high.
Most swim bait slingers says it started rising in mid-April, trending the last few years. They'll drop at 20 feet in late July and early August. So
yeah, that all depends on the rain and the river below, but sometimes it stays high longer. But that's kind of what they try and do, and it's kind of like a stair step. They got to take care of beaver, table rock. They take care of. the most out of the ones on the chain, and then bull shoals, kind of gets what's left. So they'll push a lot of water into bull shoals if they
How
have to.
fast will they drop bull shoals come early fall? I know East Tennessee likes a 44-foot drop in like a month.
They usually do a foot a day.
Okay.
They can do a foot a day.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah, that's a lot of water moving out.
Jeez.
Yeah, they can tuck it down quick.
Says it gets high enough you can fish a picnic table pattern. Man, that's true. They'll get on anything. I fished some like on Smithland Pool over there on the Ohio River. I think I mentioned this before, but we got on an appliance pattern one time. We were catching them off pattern. Yeah, we were catching them off a dryer, an old refrigerator, anything that was a current block, and the water got up high and junk was sitting on the bank when the water got up in it. You could catch a fish behind anything. Was it
Maytag or Frigidaire?
I didn't get the brand, man.
Okay.
The bass were largemouth.
Let's get specific here now.
Let's see what else. So let's start with I wanted to talk a little bit about your roots out in Southern California. I know we were talking earlier. I had no idea that you spent some time growing up in there. So, what was that like out there? You said you fished the Delta and places like that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I grew up in a town outside of Bakersfield called it was Taft, California, and so we were actually closer to the southern lakes, Castaic, Casitas, Cachuma, more of a desert environment. We get 8 or 9 inches of rain a year. So the lakes were small, mainly rocky lakes, but they had some, Castaic had, I don't know how many of the top, world record class fish. I think it had almost half of the fish in the United States came out of Castaic. So it was one of the best times to be in California. I grew up and I left California in '93, I believe. I was going to Fresno State and I wanted to be a professional angler. So I saw it on TV and I was like, man, that looks really cool. And at the time there was only one Bass Pro. So I figured I was in college, I was young, and if I was going to fish professionally, I needed a big sponsor. So Bass Pro was my game plan. So I went to Springfield, Missouri, finished out college. And when I was going to college, I started working here. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door. Fishing, you guys might remember the Central Pro-Ams, some of the regional 4-state area tournaments. That's kind of how I got my start as far as being sponsored by Bass Pro Shops. And that was the reason why I moved from California. But when I was in California, what was great is, like we talked about, you had Clear Lake in the Delta up north. So I fished West Coast Pro-Am, and then I fished WON. And we would, I was young, and so I would fish as the amateur or the non-boater. And, I got to learn a lot. I got to fish with some of the best guys out there. Got to fish against Aaron Martins a lot growing up on Castaic. And then would go up north, which was a totally different environment. So you got the clear, deep, rocky lakes of Southern California and the mid-California area. And then you go up to where they call them tules, but you had tules, grass, boat docks, a lot more milfoil, hydrilla in the Delta and Clear Lake. And so you got to flip, punch, throw a frog, throw the big swim baits. I can remember some great memories where you take a broomstick or a shovel handle and you'd cut it, you'd join it, and you use deep sea hooks and you dress the feather on the rear. And, these are like 12 inches. So you'd have a V to make the joint where it would swim, and then you'd angle the front of the actual shovel handle. Then you'd airbrush it. You'd drill holes in both joints to add lead, and then that was your swim bait. So you'd reel this 12-inch homemade piece of wood.
Oh my!
Before they started making the AC plugs, which was one of the original wooden jointed trout baits. And like at Castaic and Casitas, the trout truck would come down and it would back down to the ramp, and there would be a tube. And around a lot of the dams, they would have it blocked off, and that's where they would release the trout. But it was just like stripers feeding. Just the largemouth, 8, 9, 10, 12-pound fish just throwing these trout like a, it was like killer whale and seals that you see. And so that was what we'd try and do, is we would mimic these trout. And that was one of the first swim baits. I've actually got one in my office that my dad and I made. And, I never caught any giant fish on it, but we actually caught some fish on it. And, it was just a great learning experience, being able to fish both finesse, clear water, rocky lakes. And then when you'd go up north, you'd learn some of the techniques with the frog, the flipping, the things that you learned on Clear Lake and the Delta. And Clear Lake is still probably one of the best bass lakes in the United States. And it's definitely one of my favorites. It's an amazing place where you can go flip for a while and catch 18 to 22 pounds. You go throw a swim bait and cull up and catch a couple, big ones. So it was really neat to be able to go out there and experience that, especially when we got to go back on the Elites. So, they would go out there on the Elites occasionally, not as much as I would like, but had a lot of good finishes on Clear Lake. And it was just nice to get back home and get to do some of that stuff that you remember doing growing up, and some of the same places that I'd maybe years prior, you'd finished a tournament, you'd got second or third on a West Coast or a WON tournament. You'd go back there and still catch fish. So that was kind of neat when, you saw it after you left in 93, moved out here, and then you'd go back and see some of the same guys you grew up fishing against were there, or fishing some of the same locations and patterns. So it was really neat.
That reminds me, it's kind of like if you have a pond that you feed the catfish, like my father-in-law, he has a pond where he feeds his catfish, and he rides his little riding lawnmower down there. And as soon as the lawnmower gets, within 50 yards of the pond, they just start swirling because they know the fish food's coming. So that's crazy. I bet that's just something to see.
It was amazing, and we tried to make a lot of different things. Like, that was kind of the start of the big hand poured worms, we use a lot of the Zoom. I'm sure you guys have all used Magnum trick worms on the stand-up heads and stuff like that. That all, I've still got some of the old molds that you had that were like 16-inch worms, and would throw. Do you guys remember the doodling technique with Don Iovino and the little glass bead? You'd put the big 12, 16-inch worm, and that's kind of where all that got its start, when we were out there shaking those big 12 to 16-inch worms on those rocky points and stuff. And it's a lot of the same stuff we still use even at Table Rock today. You 10, 12-inch worms a lot when we fish down here in the summer months. So it's kind of weird to see how it has changed a lot. But then there's a lot of things that have stayed very similar. I think with fishing, it seems like it's like the bass boats. They've stayed the same, where the electronics have, been the real thing. The electronics have really changed the most over the last 5 to 6 years, kind of like a trolling motor with spot lock. So, it's weird to see some of the changes. And then you go out there to California now and you see some of the swim baits they got, or the glide baits. You're $150, $200 for some of those. Pretty amazing the way the lures have changed, along with some of the technology that is used. I just wish, I wish I had livescope to go out there and throw a big swim bait around. Could you imagine that? You can see it 90 feet out, and you can watch the fish come up to it. You'd know how to speed it up, slow it down, pause it. You'd know how to make it work when those fish are coming up behind it. Where back then you just had to just kind of all blind cast, and you really couldn't see what the fish was doing or what your lure was doing. So it'd be a real treat to go back out there now with live scope and some of the technology we have.
Well, so what have you heard about those lakes out there now? Are they still? I know Clear Lake's been consistent, but some of the historic, record producing lakes, they're kind of on a downward swing right now, aren't they? Is that what you've heard? Or
Yes, they definitely are. And a lot of that, like when we talk about Casitas is still real good, Lopez and some of those smaller lakes, but like Castake, one of the used to be the premier big lakes or big fish lakes, is it had stripers get in it from the California aqueduct. So all that water is pumped from Northern California through the aqueduct. And the aqueduct is just a cement canal, and it has stripers, catfish, perch. But when they get into those other lakes, like they got into Castake, and that really hurt the bass population. It just, those lakes, because they're so, they're rocky, they don't have a lot of vegetation or anything in them. when those stripers get in, they just decimate the shad population, and so the bass just literally starve out. And there's still some good fish. It's just not like it was, 15, 20
So
years
there's probably that separation between your 12 to 14, and then you have your absolute giants still.
Giant. Right, and that tends to be the case now, and it's just there's more competition for the food, and the stripers kind of went out on that, and that's why you see the Delta and Clear Lake tend to stay a little more consistent, have more grass and more structure, like boat docks with the pole boat docks, not just floating docks, the Tules and places for the bass to go where this, then they don't have stripers in Clear Lake that I'm aware of. They have white bass, but they don't have any stripers.
Yeah, and I also heard that the state of California kind of cut the funding for the rainbow trout stocking program, and that was, I don't know how long that's been going on, but that's just nothing but solid protein getting cut out of those really big basses, diet. So they're having to eat a bunch of little stuff so they grow a lot slower, and I think that's probably a big part of it as well, from what I've heard.
Well, you get that, you kind of like your father-in-law's pond. You get fed every single day at the same spot at the same time,
once
or
a
once a
week,
week, whatever their feeding schedule is. They get used to, that steak dinner, and all I got to do is, eat a couple veggies between now and then, and then all of a sudden that's gone, and they're conditioned. I mean,
they're eating Cheetos every day.
A little snack pack instead of the steak.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Right. That's right.
So what, I've never fished. I fish Mission Viejo out there. I've got family that lives in the Los Angeles, California area, Pasadena and stuff. And I remember fishing Mission Viejo and seeing it, and it was stocked with trout. And I just remember seeing these just huge bass. The water was like 20-foot visibility, 25-foot visibility. I think you could see grass down super, super deep, but you could see fish. You just see a big it was a small fish, but you knew it had to be big because it was so far away. But the California Delta is something that I've not fished. And what's that all about? Is that just a bunch of grass? Is it a lake? It's canals and things, or how's that fish?
It's really unique, because it's tidal, it's canals, and it has places like Frank Track, some of those areas that either the levees have broken and it has actually opened up some of those levees and made like a little lake. But for the most part, it's a lot of canals. You got Big Break, which is more of a lake style, but it's lined with tules. It's got milfoil, it's got hydrilla, and it's got riprap rocks, laydowns, all those things. And there's just hundreds and hundreds of miles of it. You can go north, south, a little bit on the west to a point, and it's a unique place because of that. And then you throw the tide in there, which the fish, how that is. Some like certain tides they bite, and when the water's moving they bite, and then the other times when the water's not moving they don't do anything. So it's because of that, there's always these feeding windows, but it's still got big ones, 10, 12 pound fish. So that's what makes it so great. And then it's still got lots of tournaments, but it's just got such a huge population of fish in it, and it's just such a massive area that it just doesn't seem like it seems like you can always get away from the pressure. Where there was a lot of lakes that were much smaller, you just couldn't do that. And so I think that's one of the things that helped the California Delta for so many years. It was so massive, and there was so much good water throughout that system that it didn't matter as much about where you were as knowing how to read the tides and then figure out what the fish were relating to, if it was the tules or the reeds, or if it was the grass, laydowns, that kind of thing.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, Ron dropped out. I just got a text from his internet service is kind of shot up there in Mille Lacs. It's hit and miss, so sometimes it lasts, but I think he's out for the evening. So at least we got to hear a little bit about the hair jig fishing up there in Mille Lacs.
Yeah.
Smallmouth adventures. So have you learned some stuff? Like, are there some techniques that you learned out in California or in the West Coast that you've been able to bring back here and that work on some of the lakes you fish around here, or even out on tour?
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, I would Missouri is a great place to be a professional angler because it does have a lot of diversity. It's the same as California. You know, you had to travel a little further to get from Southern California to Northern California than you do, say, like where we live in the Branson area. You can be at Bull Shoals, Table Rock, Beaver. You can go to Dardanelle, Truman, Lake of the Ozarks, Grand. All those lakes are different, and they're all within a couple hours, from Branson. And that's what makes it so great is, you've got dirty flatland type lakes, and then you've got your deep, clear highland reservoir styles like the Table Rocks and the Bull Shoals. And then, like we talked about today, you got the fluctuation of it. So Bull Shoals is high, Table Rock might be normal. If you want to go flip bushes, you head down to Bull Shoals. If you want to fish structure in the summertime, you can stay at Table Rock or Lake of the Ozarks. It's almost always consistent. They don't let that lake fluctuate hardly at all. Truman, totally just like, it's like Bull Shoals. It's up and down all the time. So that gives you a variety of things to do, and the water clarity changes drastically when you go to those different bodies of water. So the techniques that work on the clear water, like out in California would throw a split shot, a drop shot, a shaky head, big jigs. I mean, we were throwing big football jigs with just like a twin tail, skirted twin tail, even in the 90s when I was out there. So now we use a skirt football jig. Everyone knows about a football jig. You fish at Kentucky Lake, you fish it at Truman, you fish it at Lake of the Ozarks. So those are all techniques that I still use. And the drop shot, I mean, how many tournaments have you seen guys win or do well? Doesn't matter if it's down south, up north. It's a technique that highly pressured fish, smallmouth love it. It's just one of those techniques that works just about everywhere you go. And if there's grass, like a lot of times at Table Rock, I'll be fishing brush piles, so I'll rig it weedless. If we go up north where there's just smallmouth and rocks, then I'll just nose hook it. So it's one of those things that I learned in California, how to use light line, how to fish the drop shot, that I use all over the United States. The same with a big jig. Fished it out there because we fished it deep, but I use it at Table Rock fishing structure. We use a big shaky head now that, a ½ ounce to 3/4 ounce with a big hook in it to throw those big worms like I was talking about, the 10, 12-inch worms that we throw at Table Rock and Truman and Lake of the Ozarks around brush piles in the summertime.
We got Ron back for a little bit. I guess he got his internet fixed for a little bit.
We'll see how long.
I don't see him yet.
Even 5 minutes with you, Ron, is
so
better
those techniques transfer. So those techniques transfer for me. I don't say it's just a Midwest thing or a Southern thing. It's, I use those techniques anywhere I travel that conditions are the same. So, if I go up north and I catch some around boat docks with a jig, it's just like fishing Table Rock with a jig, or, out in California at Clear Lake.
Thanks. Thank you. Look at this. Bye. My daughter made us cookies for the live stream.
Oh,
sorry, guys.
Wow. You got
Where's
cookies.
Brian?
Yeah.
Brian. Hey, Brian.
Yeah, if you can only share.
Good
Yeah,
Lord Almighty.
We don't have that technology yet. Give it a couple years, though. We'll be able to share food over the internet, I'm sure.
Brian and I, let's come up with something then.
Yeah.
Brian, you talk about
how does that taste? You gotta explain it.
Yeah, we'll tell you how good it is. I mean, if that'll help.
You talk about a lot of the stuff that you learn coming from the West Coast. I know a lot of stuff that we use in the Midwest here, and for you on the Elite Series has came out of California. Are you seeing any new stuff coming out of California still to this day?
Well, I'm a little out of the loop, just being in the Midwest. Like spy baiting, that's not really just a California technique, but some of those techniques like that, similar to some of the things that first came across, drop shotting and some of those lighter line or those things came through either Japan or through California.
Right.
And that was one of the techniques I kind of thought was kind of interesting. And I think California people just, because of the pressure on the lakes, they adapt or try new things quicker. I know being in Missouri now for over half of my life, that it's a little different here because you think you can just move somewhere else and do the same thing and avoid pressured fish. So because our lakes here are so much bigger, I think we don't try new things, or I don't try new things as often as I should, where in California, everything was so small, you can run around the lake several times, where you know, here you can run for an hour and then fish a place. So I think a lot of that I personally would try more lure selection changes in California than I do here, because here, if I think they're biting a big worm on brush piles, I'm just going to run somewhere else and try and find brush piles that the fish are biting on versus trying different lures or techniques. So I've kind of lost some of my, I guess, experimentation, if you would say, because I think I can make things work by moving to a different location. Same.
I think we get all caught up in that a lot, where we don't try a different lure going down the bank. I know that's one thing that I've been working on, is just switching it up. Instead of throwing that spinnerbait or throwing that jig for 25 minutes, switch it up every 5 minutes. Try something completely different. Trying to, just like beating that dead horse.
Yeah, I've seen where it's good or bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that is a two-edged sword, because you could move 10 miles and be in a little bit different watercolor or different, you know, up a creek further, and then they'd actually want your spinnerbait, where if you're down in the midsection of Table Rock, the water may be too clear on a calm day to have a bite the spinnerbait. So some of that is where you're at, but a lot of it is being able to read that water and then adjusting based on what you see. And that's one thing that I think you see a lot of, you know, with some of the anglers that come from the Midwest, that diversity on being able to read the water and not be afraid of the clear water or the dirty water. So I think that's a good thing, to be able to adjust like that. And you guys probably adjust a lot. I mean, if where you fish, I mean, you got some clear lakes, but you got some really dirty water too. And you got some places that have some pretty tough fishing conditions.
Yeah.
So I got a question. So you've been doing this for a while. You fished all over the country. Is there a bait, or maybe two baits, that no matter where you go, it's gonna work? Because I know there's a lot of baits that are kind of region specific. Like we just kind of talked about, you could take something that works really good in Southern Illinois and you go up into, you know, New York and it's not going to work, or you may go to Florida and it's not going to work. But is there a bait or two that you feel confident that you can put it in your hand anywhere in the nation and get bites on it?
Well, number one would be a drop shot.
Okay.
Anywhere you go, you can get a bite on a drop shot. I still believe in a jig a lot. I throw a lot of jigs, always have. And the reason why is you can just change the colors in the skirt combination. You can change the color of the skirt and then your trailer based on, you know, if you want like a zoom chunk, or if you want a twin tail. You can move water based on what trailer you use. But I like it because you can swim it, you can hop it on the bottom, you can throw it around boat docks, you can throw it around grass, and it just tends to catch big fish. And I have not seen, it doesn't matter if we're fishing in Florida, doesn't matter if we're in the Louisiana Delta or the Sabine River, or we're up north, they still bite a jig. So, I mean, you could be on Cayuga or you could be at St. Lawrence, and they still bite a jig. So if I had two to pick, that would be it. And the only problem with that is it's slow, you know, and it's unless you're swimming a jig. If you're throwing a drop shot, it's fairly slow. And if you're throwing the jig, you know, it's for the most part covering water pretty slow. But those are my two most confident.
Mike says, what is a jig? Might have to get one. So Mike is my buddy that I fish Table Rock a lot. I know when we talked earlier, Brian, we were talking about staying in Mill Creek. That's my travel buddy. And the only time Mike doesn't fish a half-ounce jig is when he's got a 3/4 ounce jig in his hand.
Well, I like Mike already.
Yes. He is a big
see, my
fan
choices would be the exact, that would be my thing. I would either go, you know, the one with the short skirt, then you see we've got a half or a 7/16, and then we go up to the one with the full skirt, and you got the 3/4 or the half and it. And that's really all you need, you know. If they, you know, clear water, you break down something with the, you know, the nice little green pumpkin and orange short skirt. I'll put a smaller profile trailer like a Speed Craw or a little Zoom Z Craw. And then with the full skirt, you know, you want something a little more bulky. Use that when there's a little more color to the water, and or when I'm fishing it out deep. So I love them. I think they mimic 3 things real well, depending on the color combination. You know, you got shad, you can swim it, make it look like a shad spawn, and then bluegill and crawfish. And I just haven't found anywhere they don't bite it. So that's one of the reasons why I throw a jig a lot.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into a little bit of jig fishing. Let's talk about fall rate. What's
okay?
What's your go-to on fall rate? Where's your breakdown on it? Or is it all the same for you? It's just a jig is a jig, or?
No. It's definitely not. Fall rate. I actually like, you know, let's take it this way. We're in the summertime, so summer through fall, I'm going to have, until the water gets below 55 on Table Rock, and once the water gets say above 70 degrees, I'm going to want a pretty fast fall rate, and so I'm going to control that by skirts. So a lot of times, if I'm using a 1/2 ounce, like this is a 5-fish lures cover jig, and if I'm going to fish this around boat docks, which we do a lot at Table Rock, I'm going to start out with a 1/2 ounce, and I'm going to want a faster fall rate. So what I do a lot of times is, like with this, I'm going to take out quite a bit of the skirt material. So I'm going to just cut it, pull it out, or I'm going to use a short skirt, and I'm going to use like a 9/16. And so what that'll allow me to do is then I'm going to put on a trailer with a slender profile and not much kicking action, or not wide kicking action. So I'm going to put on something like a Speed Craw or a Z Craw. A Z Craw Junior works really well because it just kind of paddles a little bit. So that's going to allow your fall rate to be fairly fast. And the problem we have is if you get a bulky jig, like a full skirted jig, and then you've got some really like a big chunk or something on the back that's got big appendages that flap, it'll fall slower. And a lot of times we have to fish on the bottom in, say, 8 to 15 or 20 feet around those docks. So if you have something that's bulky and doesn't fall straight down fast, a lot of times it pendulums way out and you miss 10 or 15 feet of that dock, especially the big, say, like commercial docks or marina docks, or you know, the big 35 foot docks, you know, the bigger docks that we have a lot of where the big boats are in. So the fast fall rate gets it down to the bottom, and it gets it down to the bottom in a straight fashion where it doesn't pendulum back out in that deeper water. And then also you trigger those strikes a little better in that clear water. They don't have time to get a good look at it. It comes by real fast, and that allows I feel it allows you to catch more fish in clear water. The dirtier the water, the more I'll leave the skirt full. I want a little more movement of the water because they can't see it as well. And that's when I'll change to a bigger chunk. So it'll have more water movement. Those fish can use their lateral lines to find it better in dirty water. So in dirty water, I want a slower fall. Even if it's a 1/2 ounce jig, I can get it to slow down. It's more bulky. It moves a lot more water as it falls, and those fish can find it with their lateral line and then visually see it because of the movement of the actual larger chunk or trailer. In clearer water, I want much faster fall, a lot less movement in my say like a Speed Craw or something that doesn't have a ton of movement and gets that bait down fast to the bottom. And I'll even hop it fast. You know, I'll hop it 2 or 3 times, let it hit the bottom, hop it 2 or 3 times, let it hit the bottom, pause it for 2 or 3 seconds, and then bring it back out of the dock and do it again. Because almost every bite I get is either on the fall or that first 2 or 3 hops when it's hit the bottom for the very first time. And I think that's a lot to do with clear water. If those fish are around that dock and they can see it, they'll follow it down. They're just sitting there waiting, and as soon as it moves, they pounce, you know, and that's the way that I believe they do in clear water. Dirtier water, a little more slower of a presentation once it falls. Hops won't be near as fast and as high as clear water.
Yeah, and I was listening to during the Classic. I was listening. Greg Hackney was talking about the exact same thing, and the guys were fishing that shad spawn early, and he was talking about, they were talking heavy and light jig, and he was talking about how you wanted that heavy jig to fall through. The fish were up in the water column, but they was talking about the guys were wanting a heavy jig to fall fast through that to trigger the bite.
Correct.
And which was really good to listen to, and it's really good to hear you kind of say the same thing, because so many times that I forget, so much of our fishing is creating a reaction bite one way or another, which is probably more often than you take advantage of a feeding bite. So it's really good to hear that doubled down on. That was good information.
And one thing to remember, a lot of times people come to Table Rock or Beaver and Bull Shoals, and they get freaked out with the water being clear. Don't let that. I mean, you have to adjust your colors a little bit just because they can see it so well. But even if you want to throw a spinnerbait in clear water where you can see 8 or 9 feet down, you can. If you want to throw a chatterbait or a crankbait, you can. You just adjust your colors. You can use more transparent colors that you can see through, so they don't get as good a look at it. But then you also just throw that speed in there. So bring it fast, move it fast. Always, fast with a few pauses or a few, twitches to make it do something erratic. That usually triggers them. But remember that in clear water, speed is always an important factor in triggering those bites, just because at Mille Lacs, it's clear. A lot of times when you're fishing a jerk bait or something like that, you keep it moving fast. Top water is the same way. Those smallmouth can see it's amazing how well a bass can see in clear water. They can see farther than you and I can see down by far, and they will come get that stuff if they can't get a good look at it.
Yeah, that's one thing I've learned from
for sure,
these live streams is talking, like when we had Chad Morgentaler on last week, he was talking about instead of going finesse in a finesse type situation where it's tough, a lot of times he'll go up to a 1 ounce jig, even in shallow water. And I've talked to another buddy of mine who's really good on Kentucky Lake, and he flips a 1 ounce, tungsten weight in a situation where I would probably be flipping a 3/8 ounce. He's flipping a 1 ounce. So he's generating a reaction strike in a situation where a lot of people would want to go like downsize or maybe slow the fall rate. So there is something to that reaction. But, there's been sometimes where I'm thinking of Truman Lake. I fished with Roger Fitzpatrick in the BFL down there just a couple weeks ago. And we were flipping bushes. The water was up like 3 or 4 feet. And I was throwing a 3/8 ounce. And there was a couple times where the fish were hitting it as I was pulling the bait out of the water. So they were suspended up in these bushes. And they didn't seem to want the bait, at least in the stretches we were in. They didn't like it, going real fast at them, but they would hit it coming up. And so being the veteran that he is, and I didn't really even know that he did this until a little bit later, he went to a 1/4 ounce weight in a little speed crawl, and he put 5 fish in the boat in just about an hour and a half. So that
were they all on the fall?
Well, I don't know, but I think that I gave him I gave him a couple clues. I'm like, oh man, that fish hit it. And he's like, where was he at? And I said, I was pulling it out of the water and he grabbed it. So after that happened a couple times, he slowed the fall rate and he started catching some fish. So I think sometimes it's a fast fall rate, and then sometimes maybe it's a slow fall rate, depending on, where they're at in the water column, I would say. But
and usually too, you can do that based on water temperature, time of the year, which is all kind of related. But when we talk about our lakes around here, late winter, early spring, that's one of the best times to throw those 1/4, 5/16 ounce jigs. Real fall, slow rate, bulkier skirt. But that's one thing I've learned. Cooler the water, the bulkier, slower fall rate. So that's just one of those things you play with, and over time you kind of learn that. And I'm sure once he saw you miss a few and you were coming up, he's like, yeah, we'll just switch this up and make it fall slower.
He knew exactly what to do. He knew exactly what to do.
So, and you have to pay attention to that. It's just like anything.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I usually flip a 1/4 ounce, but for some reason I was like, I'm going to throw something a little bit heavier this time. And, I should have probably been flipping a 1/4 ounce, but that's the way it goes. I should have picked up on that clue and made the adjustment. Jay wants to know, what pound tester are you throwing when you're flipping a jig, or what's your go-to line on jigs?
For the most part, unless we're talking about something I want, if I'm fishing boat docks, it's usually 14 or 17. That's what I really like to throw. Even on table rock, even in clear water. So 14, anytime I can see 8 or 9, 10 feet down, I use 14. Anytime I can see 5 foot or less, it's 17. If they're real aggressive or in the backs and stuff like that, and underneath the walkways where you don't have to let it fall very long, I'll use 17 even in the clear water.
Talk about your setup a little bit for your jig fishing.
It's just it's pretty simple. I use a St. Croix Legend Elite 7 foot medium heavy, and then I use a Johnny Moore's Platinum Series bait casting reel, and I use a 6-4-1. That's just what I feel comfortable with. Still moves line pretty quick, but it's not real fast, and that's it. Fluorocarbon, XPS fluorocarbon, and mainly just 14. If I had one to choose to use all the time, it would be 14 pound. And then, I'm going to vary the jigs like we talked about, but for the most part, I like to use the shorter skirts in the summer months with a slender profile trailer. And then if the water's dirty, I'll go to more of a full size jig with a little bulkier, trailer. And that's kind of the way I keep it. I really, even traveling all over the United States, I only carry about 6 jig colors. So, and then one of those is white. So, I mean, I've got 5 colors, black and blue. You'd be amazed at how many fish you can still catch on black and blue, even in clear water. So, and I think that's a lot what we talked about, reaction. It's something falling down and they just don't have time to consider either biting it, or they either bite it or they don't. That's why I try to make that jig, especially as the water warms up, and if it's clear, fall fast.
In water less than 50 degrees on your jigs, I have a lot of luck with just straight black. You throw straight black a lot?
Here we throw more straight browns, but we will throw straight brown. We do throw some straight black, but not as much as we do black and blue or black and brown. That's a really good combination. But the only thing that I seem to do really well on here is when I swim a straight black. That's totally different with what we're talking about now. So, but we do use it some, but I haven't tried it a lot. A lot of guys buy the black and blue, but our blue only has like 10 or 12 strands in it, and then if you want, you can pluck some of those out, but it's not a real dominant, like half black, half blue. So it's almost all, it's 3/4 black.
I gotcha.
And I do like I do like a black chunk almost as much, or maybe a little more than, like if you have a black and blue jig with a black chunk, I like it a lot in the clear water versus a blue chunk.
Yeah, I do too. I like black, and it's how a color is for anybody. No matter, you just get whatever you have confidence in, you fish better. But old black, I think that sometimes gets overlooked. And the black with just the accent of blue is. I like purple too. That June bug purple with a black trailer sometimes. Spring.
Yeah, I do like that combination as well. And I was always amazed when we went up north how well the smallmouth loved black. It didn't matter what it was. They liked black. And I mean, it seemed like the shallower the fish were, the more they liked black. And then several guys, they love to eat leeches. And I was like, well, where in the heck are they getting all these leeches from? But, maybe that is. Or those little rays that, that get on the side of the fish. You guys have probably all seen those. They're black. So I was wondering if they just hate them, and so they're always trying to kill them. But it seems like black works really well for smallmouth.
Yeah, they do. I throw a like a 3/8 ounce spinner bait, and I'll take the whatever skirt happens to be on it, and I'll just put an old school living rubber black skirt on it, like I would throw night fishing, with the black spinner bait.
Yeah.
And they on a bright sunny day with no wind, that old black skirt, they'll hit that thing. I don't know what it is. Yeah, but you're absolutely right on black and smallmouth. You're 100% correct.
And they even bite that combination at Table Rock. We don't tell a lot of people about that, but we'll even take the nickel blades and take a Sharpie and make them black. Yeah, and they will get it. Yeah, they sure will. It's weird because you can barely see it. You know, if you use like even say you guys have probably all seen a War Eagle mouse spinnerbait. You know, it's pretty dull, but you can see it all the whole cast. And you tie on the black one, you can't see it at all. It's weird.
Maybe that's the deal.
Love it.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what we were talking about even on the jig with the fall rate and stuff of that. It's, you know, it's more transparent colors, fast fall rate, small profile trailer. That works really well on the clear water, just like the black spinnerbait. Can't hardly see it, doesn't have a lot of flash, and they react to it better.
Doesn't have a lot of contrast to it. You know, you got a black and a blue. There's some contrast, there's some depth to it for us at least. And black, flat black, I mean, it has nothing to it. It's just a shadow going by, essentially.
Yeah, and that might be the case. You might have, you know, hit the nail on the head is the silhouette up against the sky. So you got some dark image, you know, and it's the sun's coming down through the water and it's clear water. So then all they can see is this shadow or dark spot, and they can't really make out what it is. But, you know, they get curious and want to eat something. So that's why they attack.
If we had all the answers, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Yeah, I told Gabe this when he was up.
We'd all have cookies.
I'm gonna take a bundle of Bassmaster magazines and tie them up and sink them to the bottom of the lake so the fish can read it, so they know what they're supposed to do on any given day.
Yeah, no kidding, man. Jeez.
Yeah, it is amazing that we make it so difficult. They just, I mean, all they want to do is eat, breed, and stay alive. I mean,
that's all they do.
They're not trying to do anything. Yeah, that's all they do.
Yeah.
Yep. They have no idea that people are spending $100,000 on a bass boat and $20,000 on electronics, chasing them around all day long while they're just eating shad, you know, crawfish. Jeez. What about a black, blue, and brown jig? Anybody throw that combination? Tom's asking. I haven't. I don't think.
I think I have.
No, I really haven't either.
That might be the key.
I have not.
Be a good recipe. I don't know.
DNL Outdoors. He says, what kind of jigs were you showing there, Brian? He's interested in possibly getting some of those jigs.
These, I'm actually part owner in this. There's 5 of us, and this is a 5-fish lures ultimate cover jig, and this one is the ultimate finesse jig. And really, this one has a completely it's a 30-degree custom designed mustad hook. The jigs are made because there was some things lacking in jigs that I could purchase, and I wanted. I used to make all my own. And so finally, we just had a production company go ahead and cut the molds, and we started, having the skirts made in color combinations that we all like for the area lakes around here. I can attest to most of the colors work everywhere across the United States I've been, but they're a good. This like the ultimate cover jigs, a really good versatile jig that can come through grass, but it works really well on rock. I don't know if you can see this, but it's got a flat base on the head. It allows it to stay in the upright position when it comes in and out of wood. So that's really what it's designed for, is to keep it from hanging in wood. But it also swims really well. It comes through grass decent. So it's a good all-around jig, but it's really designed for rock and brush. Which is what we have around here. And that's what we designed all these for. It's basically designed. This one's got a real soft weed guard, a little bit lighter line, a little bit smaller profile, but we have it all the way up into 9/16, and we changed the hook size on the 9/16 to a 4. This is a 3/0. It's a 60-degree mustad cross eye, but still got the pointed head. It allows it to come through that wood and rock real well without hanging up. And so it's a lure company that there's myself, Pete Winters, Bobby Albert, and Mike Knight. They're anglers in this area that all just wanted to design some baits that they wanted to have that they thought would be beneficial. And we've got everything from, big shaky heads we were talking about, throwing the big worms. We've got different styles of hooks based on, say, you wanted to throw an 8 or quarter with a small finesse style worm. We've got those. And then we've got the big meat hook where you're going to throw your old monsters and make trick worms. And they've all got a center pin with a screw lock. And you can see, we can screw this on here. This is actually a 6/0 mustad hook on a 1/2 ounce. And we make them in 1/2, 5/8, and 3/4 with the 6/0 hook. And then we make 1/8 and 1/8 to 3/8 with a cross side 4/0 and 5/0 hook. But it just allows you to have a good hook for these size worms. I like to throw this with this head design. Stands up on the rocks as it sits, but you can work it through there. It'll come through every bit as well as a Texas rig. And it just allows me to fish that rocks and that deep brush, which we fish a lot on table rock.
Are you throwing that on the same setup as you would a jig?
I throw it on a, what works really well for me is a 7/6 medium heavy, because I'm going to make fairly long casts and I want to be able to move a lot of line, but that's what I'll throw it on with usually a 14-pound line, sometimes 17, depending on if I'm at like Falcon or Kentucky. But on table rock bull shoals, mainly 14, sometimes as light as 12, but it's definitely designed for structure fishing. Or if you go up to Lake of the Ozarks, you can throw the 1/2 or the 5/8 around the deeper boat docks where they have the brush piles, and that big 6/0 hook. You can use this in the summer months, but it'll allow you to throw 20 and be fine with that because it's got that 6/0 hook. So it's not an overpowering 6/0 hook, but it can definitely handle the 20-pound line. And we had to gauge some of the hook sizes, and that's why you'll see the difference when we go to more of the finesse style. You can actually tell if you look at those. Sure. So some of them will overlap, but you have to have the right hook for the right size bait. To me, this hook would be too small for an old monster or a mag trick worm, but it works perfect for, say, your 5-inch Magnum finesse or even a trick worm. So it doesn't overpower the bait, and it's a lighter wire. A lot of times when you're throwing an 1/8 or a 16th, you'll be throwing it on 10 or 12-pound line. And that lighter wire hook just gets better penetration.
So for the guys that are listening, where can we pick up some of these jigs and shaky heads at?
Well, if you come to the Table Rock area, you can always go to Harder House. They carry a full line of products right by the beer. And, you get your steaks for barbecuing and grilling. Extreme Outdoors has them. It's also at the Table Rock area. Boatworks up in Springfield, Missouri carries them. You can get them online at FiveFishLures.com. Awesome. I think if you order over $50, it's free shipping. So check it out. We have a net head, also designed with, this is kind of cool because we didn't talk about this, but Table Rock, we talked about the clear water and everything. So everyone uses a Ned rig, and you got the standard Zoom beat down 3.5-inch stick style bait that goes on. So everyone's done that. This one comes with a weed guard. It's actually really nice. It's heat welded on the end so it won't fray. But what I like to do is we have these in 1/16 through 1/4, so you can use Table Rock. We use a lot of the real small swim baits, so you can just feed it on, and you don't have to buy any extra or special heads. So in the springtime, early springtime, we'll throw a lot of these small 2.8, 3.1 inch. This is a Bass Pro Speed Shed. Kitech, same thing. And then one thing I learned, or what I started doing, was just use the head for wacky rig. So I'll throw the 16th or the 8th, and there you go. It comes through the brush really well. It's got the weed guard right there, and you can skip it around docks, throw it around the buck brush.
Man, so that makes sense. One application.
It's a multi-purpose jig head. Yeah, I like that.
For the budget angler.
I've got some of those too. I bought some last time I was at Table Rock, and they're put together pretty nice. The little net heads. They're nice. Yeah,
they're really nice. They've got the cross-eye hook. They've got the same designed head as, say, the larger shaky heads where it comes through the rock and the brush real well. And this 90% of the time I pull mine out, but if you want it there, you can leave it. And then but what I was it was one of the first cross-eye hooks I'd actually seen in that. And what that does is it just keeps it centered when it comes through, like when you're coming up over brush. It also helps, I think, when you set the hook, keep that hook in the roof of their mouth, which is where you want to get the hook. So I've always been a big believer in the cross-eyed hooks.
Well, Mike said he's going to be ordering $50 right after the stream. He's got a Z20, so he's got a little bit of storage room left in that thing. It's mostly jigs, but
yeah, I bet he does.
He needs to get on that Ned rig bite too. Let's see what else we got here. Stephanie says, in her opinion, let me put you back on the full screen here. That's the first time I've actually did the solo screen. I think that worked out pretty good. You could show your baits a lot better. Stephanie says, in her opinion, people forget about the grub. She says, I've been fishing for 2 years and have caught my PB at Cedar Lake, which is a local lake, on a grub. Do you guys still fish the grub down there on Table Rock, Brian?
We do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Smoke grub. Yes. It's just, it's all trends.
Right.
But, this is kind of a trend. The smoke grub, we have lots of guys. I always have a pack in my boat. We use them all the time. So yes, they still work exceptionally well. It's like a twin tail. A lot of people don't use those on the back of the jig. They use something in a Rage craw or Z craw, but the old twin tail for me is still one of my favorites. I mean, we've been using it for years and years, and I never leave home without the twin tails for my jigs. Just not leave home without a grub on Table Rock.
It's crazy. I don't even think I own a twin tail right now. So
I was laughing at Phil. Phil says he had to take an intermission. He has to go get some milk and cookies. I keep biting off this cookie. By the way, guys, this cookie is excellent.
They were delicious.
Sorry to say that.
They were delicious.
They're very good.
Not fair.
We didn't even see him eat one.
I know. I have. If I'm ever down at Table Rock, I'll have to have my daughter bake some cookies and bring you some personally because she's got it dialed in. Works out really good. So here's a question. Yeah. Phil says, Brian, do you have any bucktail jigs stored away anywhere? You throw a bucktail jig at all?
You mean I do. Deer hair? Is that what he means by bucktail?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah,
like bucktail. What we're talking about?
Kinda.
Yeah, I tie my own. I do.
Okay. Well, I tie.
If that's what he's meaning,
like a preacher jig or prayer jig. That's what I consider like a bucktail jig. More like that's kind of my version of a hair jig around here.
Right.
Where you're throwing it out, and kind of stroking.
It's 6 inches long.
Yeah.
Well, see what Ron was talking about a while ago is what I would use for crappie fishing
or trout.
Yeah. A little marabou jig.
That's what I'm talking about. We use deer.
When we talk about bucktails or hair,
got a real slender profile.
Yeah.
Like more of a
I have those.
Type of thing.
I have those. I do not. Yeah. I have those. I don't tie my own to those. I tie my own to the small ones, and they're just for smallmouth mainly. But they're those little black ones, 1/8 to 3/16. That's what I was talking about.
What head are you tying those on? Is that one of your heads that you tie it on, or?
Yeah, it's just a round ball and just a nice sharp light wire hook. And they're pretty small. You don't want a huge profile.
Yeah. Like the size of a crappie jig.
Exactly.
Getting back to the bucktail jig though, that's an old at Gabe at Little Grassy. Fred Washburn and Bob Bush were some legends in Southern Illinois, local legends. But Bob would throw in the winter, like early spring, late winter, he would throw a little bucktail jig with a 101 spin, the old Uncle Josh 101. And man, that thing was money on Cedar, or on Grassy rather. In that 39-degree water to 44, 45, that water temperature range, that little bucktail jig with the 101 spin, black little spin pork frog on the back was money. And when she asked that question, or whoever asked that question, it just reminded me of that old hair jig had aside from the smallmouth thing we're talking about, that old bucktail thing that's been around a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I bet they still work too.
Oh yeah, that stuff.
Because no one throws them.
Exactly.
So what's
that was when I was looking in my tackle box and I found a Seville, the jointed swimmer, and I was like, man, we used to order these and have to wait months to get one of those Sevilles to throw, and now I've got a box full of it. I don't even take them with me.
Yeah,
but you know,
that's
you used to
good,
throw those all the time. We were talking about baits you never use anymore.
Now, like everything's so.
Are they really back ordered?
Well, it seems like everything is, or you know, there's gaps right now with the whole COVID thing. It seems like you can get stuff for a while and then it's gone. Then you can get it for a while and it's gone. So it just depends on what it is.
Just going to the local.
There's
go ahead,
everything is susceptible to it right now. It seems like it doesn't. It's everything. I'll be glad when we get all that caught up.
For sure.
I got fishing stuff I want to buy.
Well, at our local academy here, that's pretty well what we have if we want to shop in a store and look at some stuff here. But I was in there Saturday, I guess, last minute shopper for Father's Day here. But the entire section of soft plastics was depleted with a handful of things here and there. Granted, it was Father's Day weekend, but same thing happened last year. Our academy, we had 0 soft plastics. You walk down the aisle and look like the Dead Sea.
Ghost town.
Oh, it was. You'd have a handful of, hot pink, grubs that may or may not work, but fortunately I try to stock up every year at the beginning of the year. Like I'm never going to see another beaver or a old monster worm ever again. But I'm glad I continued that trend last year. So.
I always save 1 pack every time I see like especially right now, if I see plum old monster, I'm grabbing like 4 packs, but I'll leave 1 pack, maybe 2 packs.
Well, see,
for somebody,
you're the guy that leaves them. I'm the guy that
take them all.
If there's 10 of them there, I'm going to grab all 10 of them and take them.
That's the karma game one.
It's defense.
It's defense. Right, exactly. So what are some of the other techniques right now? We kind of touched on a few techniques that are working at Table Rock in the summertime for summertime fishing. What are some of the other things that you do out there?
Well, we talked about the bigger worm on the brush piles, gravel, brush piles on gravel or drops, and brush piles around docks. That's always a great summertime thing. Well, the jig, I always have 2 tied on. I have a jig that's either 5/8 or 3/4, and then I have the worm, which is usually 5/8 or half. And so that's my combination. Some crankbaiting. You can throw some like a 10 to 20 foot crankbait right now. Some of the fish are already moving out. The drop shot's working well. A lot of it right now, we're still casting the drop shot. So you'll cast it to the edge of the bushes and work it from the edge of the trees, which are in about 6 foot out to about 18. And a lot of smallmouth doing that. Did catch some on my last guide trip a few days ago, already out in 27 feet on some brush piles. So we caught those on a drop shot as well. So there are some fish moving out, but deep cranking, that's kind of one of the ways we catch bigger fish. And then we also, the swim baits, we use a lot of the Z swimmers on a 3/4 or 1 ounce head. That's kind of our go-to if they won't touch the crankbait. That's basically how I fish Table Rock all summer long, is either brush piles with a jig or a worm, crankbait with on the ledges. And the crankbait and the swim bait, they don't have to be around brush, just more bait where the break is. And then fish a lot of boat docks with a jig.
Are they moving any water through Table Rock right now?
They are definitely moving some water. Not as much as I'm sure some of the people would like, but they're trying to get everything back down to normal.
How high is it right now? I noticed it.
It's 922 or 923. It's right in that.
Okay.
922 and a half, 923.
What's pool?
917 is the new pool. Normal, the old timers, it was always 915, but the new pool's 917.
Okay.
So they raised.
So what are there certain areas of the lake that fish better in the summer? I know, like for instance, Lake of the Ozarks, there will definitely be certain areas that are fishing better than other areas, especially, through the winter and the spring. What's your opinion on some of the different areas and how they fish differently than other areas? You see what I'm getting at on that?
Yeah, our lake really tends to do with watercolor. So you fish the James, Long Creek, and the Kings River different than you fish the dam area, or what we call it, like the Cumberland City, Highway 13 area, Baxter, and then the White River. The Clearwater areas of what we just talked about, the last part, that's more the drop shot, the shaky head, a little swim baits. If it gets any type of color at all, or you have a windy, cloudy day, they will bite a deep crankbait in that clear water. It's just something you have to kind of play with each day. But the football jig, the big worm, and the drop shot tend to be the best, the predominant baits in the clear water. And then when you go into the off-colored water, which would be your Long Creek, Kings River, and the James, that's when you get more swim baits. Yeah, we didn't even talk about, but you can throw a flutter spoon. You can fish a little shallower. So instead of 25 to 35, you can fish a lot of that 10 to 20 foot range in the colored water. But it's still all basic, pretty much the same baits. A lot of times, even in a little bit off colored water, you have to still throw a drop shot sometimes if they've been getting pressured a lot. So you always have a drop shot, but the swim bait and stuff tends to work. The swim bait, crankbait tends to work a little better in that off colored water.
With the high water, are you still seeing any fish up shallow?
Oh, yes.
Obviously,
Yeah,
there's
still
always fish up shallow.
There are, and even if the water's not high, there's always fish up shallow. So there's definitely a pretty decent bite, but you got to find a little bit of watercolor to catch them out of the bushes well. And as it gets warmer and warmer, it seems like the size gets smaller and smaller. So it's a lot more of the 15, 16-inch fish and not the 3 and 4 pounders. You will occasionally catch some, or 1 or 2 a day is all I've been able to catch, but you just don't catch a lot of them like you were earlier in the year.
Guys out there in YouTube land, if you've got some questions for Brian, feel free to ask. Anything to do with fishing out on the tour, Table Rock Lake, anything at all. Ryan has a question on here. He's wanted to know Nico rig or Carolina rig.
Well, I'm going to have to go with the Carolina rig. I need to play with the Nico rig a little more. I just haven't done it, and I've won a lot of money with the Carolina rig. So yeah, that's my choice for me.
That makes me happy. I like the Carolina rig.
Well, it covers water very effectively. You can move it really fast if you need to by adjusting your weight. And the thing I like about it is you can put a brush hog, you can put a finesse worm. I mean, you can put whatever you want back there based on watercolor and the size of fish you're fishing for. So, yeah, I mean, you can put a mag trick worm, or you can put a finesse worm. So that's why I like the versatility of the Carolina rig. And I will tell you one thing I like to do, and this just may be me, but I'll run monofilament in between, and I think it allows that bait to float a little longer, not float for very much longer, but it allows a little freer movement, and it doesn't drag the bait on the bottom continuously like I think fluorocarbon does. A little more buoyant than fluorocarbon. So I use mainline is fluorocarbon, and then I'll use a leader that's actually monofilament.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I use Braid on my main line, but then I use mono as the leader, and for the exact same reason. Yeah. Yep.
So see, we're very intelligent people, I can tell.
Obviously, but we didn't get any cookies, so we must not be too smart.
You guys are at the wrong house. David says, he says, sorry I got on here late. Well, David, I'm glad you got on here. It's good to see you on here. Maybe you already covered this, but Brian, what are your thoughts on Braid with fluorocarbon leader on a spinning reel?
All right, David. I like to use that, and I'm going to tell you why. I use it for most all applications except for really one. The reason why is you can buy some high quality braid, and you can put it on at the beginning of the year, and you can leave it on there all year. And unless you have a major wind blow tangle that you don't pay attention and get it in there where you can't get it out, you can use that all year. So I have a guide service on Table Rock still, and I can use drop shotting. I can use it all year and use the same braid. The only time I don't like to use the braid with the fluorocarbon leader combination is when I'm casting something like the hair jig, or say we talked about the small swim baits, or the grub on a light 1/8 ounce to 3/16 ounce head. I like straight 6, and it's just, I have a little bit of trouble occasionally with the modified Albright that I tie. Sometimes it'll catch when I'm trying to make long casts, stay way off fish and count that lure down. I just like the feel of straight fluorocarbon, especially 6 pounds. So if I'm going to use 6 pound, I'm going to be casting and reeling that bait continuously. I like to just leave it as straight 6. But for everything else, I do the combination.
What size braid are you throwing, Brian?
I use usually 12. It's just it's the Bass Pro Excel braid that they have, and I just tie the modified Albright, and I clip it real short, but it seems like occasionally it'll catch, and the 8 seems to do it more. I really don't use a lot of 6 when I do that. When I do the actual braid to the fluorocarbon leader, it's mainly 8 or 10, even up to 12. So I might have to try it a few more times with the 6, but it just, throwing that little hair jig around a lot, it just seemed like I could get more distance with straight fluorocarbon. That's maybe just me. You know, I don't know, you guys might have a little more experience with that, but I grew up throwing straight, you know, monofilament or fluorocarbon on spinning reels. It's just you got to change the line a lot, you know, and you get a lot of twists that you have to deal with.
When you do put a leader on, Brian, what's your leader length?
I usually go all the way to the reel, or right at the reel. So it'll be, you know, it'll be almost, you know, most of my spinning rods are 7.1 or 7.6. So I'll go, you know, 13 feet, 14 feet.
Yeah. I everything I have at spinning rod has braid to fluoro. I haven't thrown, well, except for I've got a little ultralight that's just a crappie deal where I go out in the pond behind my house and cast. It's got 4-pound test on it, but it's just straight 4-pound mono. But everything else is like 15-pound fluoro to 8-pound leader is kind of my standard, you know. And me personally, similar to what you said, Brian, I like to stop the knot, you know, on the leader right before it gets into the bell. That's just kind of my rule of thumb. So it seems like once it gets on the spool, it has a tendency to maybe catch a little bit more, but it usually ends up being about a 7 to 8 foot leader for the most. You know, I just kind of pull some off and then pull a little bit. I don't sit there with the tape measure and get it exact, but a lot of times I will reel it up to where the knot is about where it needs to be, and then I'll trim it accordingly. And for the same reasons you just said, you know, it lasts forever. That braid, you know, you can get several years out of it.
What the best thing that I found is with my son, he just turned 7, and that is, you don't have to worry about a wind knot with fluorocarbon or mono of yesteryear, and it's just all a mess. But you look back there and he's fighting it, and just makes the day on the water so much easier. And I'm sure with your guide trips, it's the same way. I mean, if you're got not so experienced and they're using a spinning rod, making it with braid makes your life a lot easier at the end of the day.
Well, you get a hook set. Your hook set. Okay, so I tried this. Okay, I was kind of struggling, even with the shaky head. This is like 2 years ago, and I'm like, well, my leader's not long enough. I need to put like a 30 or 40 foot leader on there. For some reason, I was thinking, you know how stuff gets in your head. You're like, the fish are seeing my braid. Obviously, I'm not getting bit. It's not got anything to do with me being in the wrong spot, right?
Right.
Because I know how to find fish.
It's all conditional, right?
Right. But so anyway, I put about a 30 foot, 40 foot section of fluoro on there, and you lose your hook set. I mean, you really have to set the hook hard because there's stretch in that fluorocarbon. If you've got the braid and only a 7 foot leader, you know, you can almost pull into them and the hook goes in them. But when you've got 40 yards it's amazing how you don't get that same hook set. And it was kind of like I was having to set the hook harder, and it was kind of hard on my elbow. You know, I was having to really get into it to penetrate, to get that hook to penetrate. So I went back to just that 7-foot leader, and I just wasn't around the fish.
Well, you know,
problem. It wasn't a leader.
You make a good comment there, because I remember when I first, kind of the opposite, when I first switched from a fluorocarbon or a mono to a straight braid, I found myself breaking off a lot because I was still setting the hook way too hard.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, you do have to soften your rod up a little bit and kind of just pull into them.
Yeah, and a couple things too. Now I'll throw. I was listening to the 6-pound fluoro thing is something I haven't tried. I'll throw for our hair jig fishing up here. Well, most of my spinning applications up here, I'll throw 10 braid and then anywhere between 6 and 10 pound leader on the braid. On the hair jig, one thing that's helped me a little bit as far as casting distance, it's critical to have the right rod set up for that. But if you shorten the leader a little bit to just 3 or 4 feet on the hair jig, you'll increase your casting distance a little bit, I think. Less of that knot going through your guides. I don't know if that is really what it is. But then on spinning, especially when you have clients every day, you know, the line twist that's inherent with spinning, it's so important to make sure that you're always closing the bail with your hand as opposed to the reel. Mm-hmm. And then it's really, really, really important to not want, when you get a fish on or whatever, to not wind over the drag. Those are the 2 biggest mistakes I have my clients make. And if you avoid that, you pretty much, you can literally fish all year without a single wood knot if you do things correctly. And it pretty much, you know, that will eliminate that almost 100% if you make sure you flip the bail with your hand, don't reel over your drag, and then with the braid is, you know, there's no memories. It really eliminates almost 100% of the problems. At least it has for me.
I like that, Ron, because when I taught my youngest at 3 or 4 to throw a spinning rod, he doesn't even know that you can turn the handle and let the bail go over. That's good. I just make sure that you always
with your hand. Yeah, always.
Here's a question for Brian real quick. Martin says top 5 baits on table rock year round. This is kind of a tough question, I think.
Top 5 is he want the? I guess we can give him. Well, the top 5 baits: drop shot, number 1. A jig in the 1/2 ounce to 5/8 ounce size in green pumpkin with a twin tail. Number 2 would be I would say something of the nature of a Czar spook. Then we need let's see, around number 3 would be a crankbait like like a Zuma Boss Hog Wigglewort style. Be number 4, and number 5 I would have to throw in a buzz bait.
Ooh,
interesting!
Wow, like
very
buzz
interesting.
Bait.
Yeah, little sneaky bait there at the end. I didn't expect that one.
I was expecting jerk bait when he said year round.
Yeah,
so.
That's interesting.
No, I throw a buzz bait a lot and still do. You don't catch a lot, but you can catch some pretty good ones on it, especially if you'll throw it.
Yeah, Ryan said he caught his PB the other night throwing a Nico rig and spinner bait, night fishing. 10 pounds, 1 ounce.
10 pounder.
1 ounce.
Well, that's a club.
That's a big one.
Yeah, that's a.
I'm with you, Ron. I'm not in that club either.
Yeah,
I'm stuck in that 8 pound club.
Yeah, me too. I'm 8 and change is it.
Was that smallmouth or largemouth though, Ron? 8 and change.
There's a difference.
Oh no, that's a largemouth.
Okay.
My best small. I'm below 8 on 7.6 is my biggest smallmouth. So
still a big one.
Yeah, it's a good one. That's a good one.
That is a beast. Speaking of smallmouth, I had a question for you, Brian, and this, Ron, this pertained to you. The differences in like northern smallmouth versus southern smallmouth, maybe the fight, you know, the locations, things like that. Have you noticed? And the reason I'm asking this is because I was talking to somebody on the live stream a couple of weeks ago, and he's from Kentucky Lake, and we were talking about the Mille smallmouth versus the Kentucky Lake smallmouth, like which one was the better fighter. And I think the one difference that I learned from going to Mille, and the smallmouth up there don't seem to jump near as much as the Kentucky Lake, like the Tennessee River smallmouth. Seems like they like to get airborne a little bit more. So what are some of the differences you've noticed between the northern and the southern smallmouth?
Who's going first?
That's for Brian.
Well, I'm not.
Brian.
I'm only. I'm.
Go ahead, Ron.
I'm only a northern down south with smallmouth, so I can't really. I can't really say that I have fished enough other places to tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing I've noticed is northern smallmouth go shallower the sunnier it is, and our smallmouth go shallow when it's cloudy and windy. Up north, they don't like that at all. Here at Table Rock, Bull Shoals, when it's cloudy is when you catch them shallow on reaction baits. And then up north, you catch more of them in the sunshine. Fighting, it's kind of hard to compare because you're catching 4 and 5 pound fish up north, where here you're catching more of the 2 to 3 pound fish. So, I mean, I think smallmouth, no matter where you go, fight great. I mean, I think they're the best fighting fish out of the 3 species, don't you? I mean, to me, they're just always full of energy.
Yeah, and I was really interested to hear you say that the smallmouth where you're at go shallow with kind of like what we associate with the largemouth, you know, go shallow with cloudy, because you're right. Sunny, warm, calm, 0 wind, middle of the day, they'll go shallow. And
the big ones.
Yeah.
We saw he's locking up, but when I was up there with Ron at Mille, I
don't know if you can hear me. There we go. He said, young man, you don't need to do anything but fish from 9 to 5. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, 9 to 5. These smallmouth up here keep bankers hours. And that's all you need to worry about. And he was 100% correct.
Yeah. Well, when we were out, you were talking about how they go so shallow on just full sunshine bluebird days. And that one little section when we fished outside of that marina, on that sand flat, and there were fish cruising around in less than 2 foot of water.
Really?
Right in the middle of the day, just cruising
right by the boat. Right
underneath the boat. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yep. And that spot we're at, when that thing's right, you can make an underhand pitch and catch 4 and 5 pounders till you get tired of it. When that spot's right,
hey,
and they'll look at you before they bite it. It's just, I don't know. Yeah.
See, to me, that's just, it's amazing that they do that. But once you get north, they're all the same. And then when you get south, that all goes away.
Huh.
So part
I'll
two
stay
of that
north.
Question, part 2 of that question,
Yeah,
Ryan,
definitely stay north.
Is like a river smallmouth, say out of Kentucky Lake, different than a Ozark smallmouth that you've noticed?
Not really. No, they're more that long, lean. You know,
right.
They fight similar. They relate to stuff. You know, fairly close. Current does dictate a little bit where they relate, but to me, they act very similar. You know, the northern ones act a little different when it comes to basically just the sunshine, but you know, they go deeper. And when I think you should be throwing a spinnerbait or jerkbait, that's when you should be throwing the drop shot and fishing deeper. And then when it's calm and sunny, that's when you should be doing the other thing. So, you know, it just seems like it's reverse. And then also, we talked about the blacks and some of the colors that they seem to really like up north versus down south. Not as much, you know, more the green pumpkins and the natural hues.
So most swim bait slinger had. He's a fan of the Spook One Knocker too. He had a big 1-day stringer out of kayak state championship. Darius King says there are jumpers here at Kentucky Lake, talking about the smallmouth. Darius is an LBL guy, so he would know. And then Cody's got a question here. Let me see. It's right here. We got Hellabass in here. He's another Minnesotan. Brian, how frequently do you catch meanmouth on Table Rock Lake?
That's a good question. There for a while we kept like breaking the record, and it seemed like they were just really going to take off, and then it's kind of slowed down. You'll catch them occasionally, but it's definitely, you don't see it as much as you did say 9 or 10 years ago, where you just seemed like everyone was catching a big one, a 4 plus. So I don't know really what's happened to that, but far less, and you still catch a few, but not near as many as you did several years ago. 5 to 9 years ago. So it's definitely seems like it's slowed down a little bit. I don't know if they're not interbreeding as well or not as friendly. I don't know.
That's very interesting.
No, I got a dumb question. Let me jump in. Meanmouth, is that a cross between a spot and a smallmouth?
You are correct.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yep. They got some of the markings, but it's mainly just around the head with the little brown bars, but they still have the patch like the smallmouth or the spotted bass on its tongue, or Kentucky bass. They still have, but they kind of brownish green. They're kind of weird looking, but you'll definitely not see the bars on their face.
So those have the red eyes too?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. How does that count in a tournament situation?
Well, like on Table Rock, all the fish have to be the same length, but if they have 12 inches on spots, then that's counted as a smallmouth.
As a spot? Okay.
As a smallmouth.
As a smallmouth.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
If smallmouth has to be 15, then that's what the meanmouth would be considered.
Okay. That's what I was thinking. Well, we'll ask a couple more questions here and wrap this thing up. It's been a good talk. I just want to say hi to Hellabass on here. Rich, I did a video with Rich on my way up to Ron's and Mille, and Rich dropped his video last week. So if you want to go check that out on Hellabass, it's his version of our half-day fishing trip up there where I caught my first Minnesota largemouth bass, and it was like that big, but it was still my first one, so it counted. And I just finished up my version of the day last night, and I'll be dropping it Wednesday, so you guys can keep an eye out for that. But had a fun time. It was a good taste of. I needed it because when I left here, the fishing was super tough, and when I got up to Minnesota, it was super easy and it was nice. It was so nice, and I had to work too hard for them. You just flip a speed crawl out there, man, and just cover water, and you get results. It was perfect.
Welcome to Minnesota, buddy.
Yeah, no kidding. It's a
on a bad day he's catching 23 smallmouth. So
yeah, we grinded today for 22, and it was a grind. So
most of them are over 4 pounds, though.
Yeah, exactly.
No, not today. Most were small today. They were 15 inches was a lot of them, but we had several 18, 19s, and 120. So I guess it's not terrible.
Yeah, well, the little ones got to eat too. It's amazing. That's the size of the fish in that. I mean, the days that we went, it was just. I've mentioned it before, but you didn't get tired of seeing 4-pound fish, but they were normal looking.
You started getting spoiled because I'd ask you if you wanted the net or your picture taken, and you'd be like, "Nah,
it's just a 4-pounder."
By the end of the trip.
Yeah, it took a high 4, low 5 to get out the camera.
God,
it was tough, man. It was something else, man. I'm ready to go back for sure. So let me ask you one more question here, Brian. And this is something that a lot of people out there, when we start fishing, we typically gravitate towards the bank. A lot of times before we get a boat, we're fishing off the bank, and then for some odd reason, when we get out in a boat, we want to still fish the bank, but we're drawn towards the bank. And there's a lot of people that are wanting to learn how to go offshore a little bit, and it's kind of foreign. It's deeper. There's a lot more out there, and you can't see it, right? So all this new technology's come along with you know, the side looking graphs and the down looking graphs, and then you've got livescope and this and that. How do you approach somebody that's new and just wanting to get into offshore fishing? How do you find fish out off the bank? You know, what's your process for finding fish out off the bank?
I do a lot of idling. You know, you just you set up the down view and the side view, and then I use you know, and you don't, if you don't have, I mean, I don't expect everyone to have 2 graphs at the console. So, you know, set up your unit where you can at least have your map in a small section so you can follow contours, and just start looking on points. And once you start looking, you know, with down view and side view, you're going to be amazed at how much it's just like there's nothing there. And then all of a sudden you're going to start seeing some rocks, and then you'll start seeing some fish around those rocks. But just remember, look for brush piles and rocks and changes in the bank. And sometimes you may see fish there, but sometimes it's good just to waypoint those areas and then come back and fish them, because a lot of times, still today, you won't see everything that's on the bottom when they're sitting real tight. Now, everyone can see them when they're sitting up there perfect. And one thing you want to remember is bass tend to be more horizontal and not vertical. So if you see a brush pile with a bunch of vertical, that's usually crappie. You want the horizontal, and they're going to be spaced out a little more, not super tight for the most part. Every now and then you'll find a big wad that's really tight, but most of the time they're going to be spread out over, you know, several feet versus crappie that's stacked more horizontal. So spend some time idling, not fishing. Go to places that are familiar with you, as far as a lake that's not just a totally strange lake where you're throwing yourself out there in an ocean trying to figure out how to find structure. Go somewhere where you've kind of fished a little bit and you know where there's some points that you normally catch fish on. Look around, just start idling those contours. And with the technology we have, it makes it much more simple to find those places, because you can actually idle, see the contours, and then look on the side imaging and down imaging to see that, you know, as you go by. That's what I recommend is tons of idle time. And then actually when you see stuff, mark it and then go back and throw at it, even if there's not fish, so you can kind of gauge what type of rocks or brush you're seeing. And you'll learn a lot real quick. And then once you start seeing fish above that, you know, those little specks, you'll start putting the puzzle together. But that would be the best thing I could recommend. Lots of idle time. That's, you know, when we used to fish, people talk about Kentucky Lake, and this is dating, you know, this is several years ago. But any of the structure tournaments we have, like on Gunnersville or Falcon, where you spend tons of time. I mean, some days you might only fish for an hour and you'd be out there for 12, and all you did was idle. You know, you make 1 or 2 casts on a school. If you get a bite and it's a 3 or 4 pounder, you're good to go and you go on down. So practice is not only going out and catching fish, unfortunately. Practice is finding as many schools as you can. So, you know, you can do a lot of damage if you sit behind the wheel in the tournament if you don't try and catch them in practice. So just remember that when it's summertime, if you're going to spend time offshore, you got to spend the time out there idling.
Yeah, I agree.
Not fishing.
Brian, are you using any forward-facing sonar this year?
Yes. Well, yeah, I've been using the Garmin's Panoptics for several years now, and it's changed. It's definitely changed the way, not only it's changed the way I fish structure. The need for waypoints are far less important to me now when I find structure, because I can just pivot my trolling motor and find it and move around. I can move around much more quick with a boat on a long tapering point that's 500 or 600 yards, or a ledge on Kentucky that's, you know, a quarter of a mile. I can move a lot quicker and scan and see that stuff faster. And then I can also see fish much better, for me, better than anything with the live scope. It doesn't matter if it's down view or clear view or 2D sonar, I can see things better with live scope. So a lot of times I'll find some brush or something, and I might not be sure what's in there, but I think there's some fish, and I can shoot it with live scope and tell right away. And so I use it to cover water, especially on large flats. long tapering points, and then I just move until I see fish, and then I start fishing for them. But your casting accuracy right into the brush piles, you can see rock changes, so you're fishing the key places, and you're not having to waste a lot of time casting to find those places, or lining up the boat with your GPS and trying to cast, and it takes you 10 casts to hit the waypoint correctly to where you actually hit the brush pile. Now you just swing it until you see it with livescope, and then you make the cast, and it speeds up the process of structure fishing.
Yeah, I got a question on your side scan. When you're side scanning and you're looking for stuff, I know it makes a difference on how deep the lake is, but in general, do you try and keep your settings on your side scan as consistent as possible, or do you change them a lot?
I try and keep them pretty consistent, but I'll run mine on like an auto medium, and then I adjust the length or the distance left and right. Unfortunately, a lot of times the deeper you go, the more washed out it becomes, so I have to adjust the contrast. So I will play with contrast a lot more, and the distance I shoot from left to right. But most of the time, when even at Table Rock, you're 35 feet or less, so you can get a pretty good setting until you get up into that 10-foot range. So then you got to kind of back down the contrast because you have so much rock. You get a real strong return echo, so then you need less contrast. So you get a better picture with less when you're up shallow. And that's the same thing with live scope. With live scope, the deeper you go, the less noise, the less suppression you need on. You can turn up the gain, and then you can also, you can turn up the contrast and have a little brighter picture to see when you're in deeper water. Once you get up shallow, now this is mainly on rocky lakes, you have to turn that stuff down considerably to get the same quality of picture. And you won't miss any fish, but you'll get rid of all the specks and the hotness of everything, and you'll get a much better picture where you can decipher things better. So it's not just all blown out with pixels everywhere.
I got you. Okay.
What's the deepest you've ever caught a fish in Table Rock?
In the wintertime, or fall, we'll catch them when the thermocline breaks up. You can catch them in 60, 80.
60, 80.
Yeah, somewhere. They'll come out of trees, and you'll be at 80, 90 feet, and they'll come from a tree. So, they usually get your bait about 35 to 60 foot. They'll it just depends on how deep it is, but they'll come up quite a ways from the bottom, and you're in 60, 70 foot when when you catch the fish. He'll be in that 60-foot range.
Yeah.
Where's your thermal?
Because they go anywhere. Right, the oxygen. Well, because it's been so high, it's not as dominant, but most of the time it's in 30, 35 feet.
Okay.
We've had a lot of water, and the high water moves it through, so it's not as bad. Fish are still kind of scattered all over.
It's amazing what current does for a thermocline.
Yeah, just keeps it loosened.
We see ours at 10 to 12 in the middle of summer. Right now, I think I was over there yesterday, and it was at like 14 or 15.
Yeah, that's kind of what I usually see.
So where's that? Where was that at?
At Cedar.
At Cedar.
It showed up. It showed up this week. So last weekend, I saw zero thermocline, maybe some at like 25 feet out in the channel in the middle of the lake, but up on or back in the creek and everywhere last weekend was wide open. I didn't see
I saw it Wednesday, the Wednesday night.
Okay, so from Sunday to Wednesday, the thermocline appeared.
Yeah.
And then this past weekend, I found it was at like 14 feet.
But we had 90-degree surface temps.
It was
90-degree surface temps.
Did you
over
really?
there
On Wednesday?
Yes, on multiple locations.
84, 85 yesterday. So,
yeah, it's crazy. I never thought I'd see 90. I mean, not just back in the shallow creek, but like halfway out in the lake. Yeah. That's like that's pretty hot.
Well, it's been warm down there.
Yeah.
It's been sticky, warm, and no wind for way too long now.
The lack of wind,
that lack of wind helps set that thermocline up too, unfortunately. And then it starts creeping up farther and farther. But I did actually find some offshore fish yesterday. And it was fun because I had Keegan with me, Keegan and my dad, and we set up on a point and we
Wrecked them.
Just wrecked them for about an hour.
Well,
so.
we'll have to talk after this stream.
Yeah, we will.
Sure.
We will.
So here's another
Cookies
question.
and fishing information.
What's that?
Man, cookies and fishing information.
Just full of it. Just full of it here tonight.
One-stop shop here.
Golly.
David says, what's your normal range setting for your side view?
You know, I like it about 60 to 80.
60 to 80?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm really covering a big area, 100.
Yep. That's about what I 60 to 80 is probably what.
I'm usually double to triple the depth.
Right.
That's kind of the general rule that I go by. So if I'm in 20 foot, I'm going to go out to either 40 or 60. It really depends on what I'm looking at, though. If I'm trying to get a clearer picture of what's down there, I'm gonna bring it in a little bit. But if I just want to see it, because I don't have the luxury of having forward facing sonar yet. But if I need to see what's in that, I'll bring it in real tight and zoom in on it, get the best picture that I can. But if I'm just looking for a brush pile here and there, I'm gonna zoom it out.
Yeah, and then you can drive over the top of it if you really want to.
For sure. Use it on downskin.
Yeah. So,
and I probably use it a little further out now because of livescope. You know, I don't need to see what it is real great. I just need to know it's there, and then I can see that. Turn around and livescope.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Do you think you always see the fish on livescope? I mean, you kind of mentioned how they can hide on the bottom, but do you typically can you see them no matter what?
Almost. I would say there's very few you miss now.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, I'm just learning. I just got my forward facing this winter before I came up here, and I mean, and I'm marking the fry with it. I mean, it's just like little glimmers. I mean, if it's there, it's there, and it's, at least that's my impression. I don't see how I'm not seeing them. If one have to hide pretty good to not show up on there. It's amazing.
So if they're moving, you're seeing them, even if they're sucked up to the bottom. If there's any kind of movement, you can tell it's a fish.
Yeah, now, Brian, one question I have for you.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to ask you: do you mount your forward-facing transducer for your Garmin? Do you mount that on your trolling motor, or do you mount it on something separate?
It's on the trolling motor.
Okay, mine is too, but I know a lot of the crappie guys will put it on a separate pole, and I can understand why after using it a little bit.
I have friends that have it that way, and it is really nice, especially when you're structure fishing and you got any kind of wind or anything. But
yeah, and you're on spot lock or
yeah, exactly. But when you're still fishing, you just never know what you're going to encounter on tour. So, and we fish a lot more shallow, earlier springtime events than structure events. So for me, it's better to be able to move that, something that I have to use another hand to deal with, or a foot. You know, it's hard to do. It's hard to flip, run your power poles, run your trolling motor, and turn your light on.
Chinese fire grill. Yeah.
So
I get it.
Follow-up question for both of you. Now that Ron, you're just playing with yours. Brian, you've had yours for a while. Do you run the perspective mode, or do you run the I don't even know what the other one is called from Garmin, but the straight on view?
I use the forward view probably 90% of the time. Perspective view works really good if you're kind of wanting to get a general look of shallow areas. It seems to work better 10 foot or less, 15 foot or less. And it's more like if you were, say you were fishing an area that was the back of a cove and it had isolated stumps here and there, it would show you where those stumps were. But I have difficulty pinpointing where to throw and seeing my lure on perspective versus forward. If I see the stump, then I can actually see my lure throw the lure there, bring it to the stump and let it fall right on top of it. Where perspective, I can't do that. I haven't been able to get it to work where I can see the lure that well, but I can see a broader area, so I can pick out the stumps without having to scan my trolling motor near as much. So it's kind of like side imaging.
Yeah. I use the forward. Well, I'm just using it because I'm still learning how to use it. So I'm not switching mine around. So I can't really say on the perspective mode yet, because I want to learn one thing before I learn the other.
Fair enough. How shallow can you see fish?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about, like applications in grass and how shallow with the forward facing. What's your
I've seen fish in just a few feet of water. I mean,
really?
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 foot.
They're up off the bottom.
Yeah.
What was that, Brian?
And I know I've seen them around docks and where the dock is in 3.5 feet of water. Now you can see them by a pole. But in the grass, just remember not to shoot out as far. So your forward distance you need to bring in. That'll allow you to see, like on the edge of the grass, if you're fishing a grass line, you don't need to see way in the grass because it'll lose itself. Bring it in closer, you get more detail when you bring it in closer, and you'll be just following that edge. It's only 10 or 15 feet out to the side of the boat or the front of the boat. So you'll be able to see in that grass a little better to distinguish those fish that are in that grass. Because once you get so far in there, you won't be able to make out anything because of the density of the grass.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
You won't be able to shoot 40 feet in a mat of milfoil, but you can see 4 or 5 feet in.
Okay.
So you can see 4 or 5 feet under a mat.
Yeah. Along the edge. Yes.
Yep.
Wow.
You sold. I think you.
Now, if it's solid,
we just got to get money. We've been wanting that technology for quite some time. But everything we hear about it, it's like, will it work?
You're gonna have to start selling cookies.
That's what I'm saying.
Amen.
It is absolutely amazing.
I think you just have to take a percentage, though. You can't take the full amount.
Hey, I'm buying the ingredients. I'm the one that buys the ingredients.
She's doing the work.
She doesn't have a job yet.
I tell you what's been cool with me on that. With that forward, at least up here on Mille Lacs, I'll know, so up here anyway. What's cool is you'll see a school of fish in front of you, and don't always know what kind of fish they are. But you'll go to the fish, and sometimes they'll move. A lot of times they don't move out of the way of your path, but you'll go over them and you'll see them go down in the water column. And, they might be at, 6 or 7 feet, and maybe you're in 12 foot of water, and you're going towards them. You can see the fish, and then they just go down. They react to the boat and they go deeper, and the boat goes by, and then of course you lose track of them. And I don't know. I think a lot of times that's walleye here, because I've caught some of those suspended fish on swim bait, and they tend to be walleye, not smallmouth. But that's really interesting to see how fish react to your presence, whether it be throwing a lure at them or just the boat in general. It's just another bit of information to try and figure out.
Yeah, I've seen those so many times where you scan an area and you don't really see much, and then you might fish it because it's one of those spots where fish use all the time. You put your trolling motor down, and then within like 5 minutes you start seeing fish, swimming through the cone on the trolling motor. And it's like, where do these fish come from? Are they just moving through the area, or were they really tight to the bottom and they're kind of relaxing and coming up and doing what they were doing before they heard the boat? You see a lot of that stuff going on. It's pretty interesting. Well, guys, this has been awesome. Let's wrap this up. It's been almost 2 hours, and I really appreciate you guys sharing the time with us. Brian, do you have anything new coming out from any of your sponsors you want to talk about, last minute stuff or anything like that?
Not really. We have the new Nitro Z21 XL, which is just a redesign of the Z21 that I've been using. So I'm looking forward to that. It's always nice to get a new toy with all the latest, greatest layouts and things like that. The rest of the stuff, I can't really think of anything else that I know of off the top of my head.
Okay. Cool, man. You're with some good companies. We use a lot of Zoom products.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Zoom products.
Zoom's good.
That'd probably be my dream sponsor. Just,
the Speed Crosby up here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Have you tried the big one, the new mag one?
Yeah, I have. I like it too. Yep. The mid-sized brush hog is pretty nice too.
I haven't got to use it as much. I need to go throw it around some bushes around here, but I'll see if I can do that tomorrow on my dry trip. Maybe we'll get lucky.
Yeah. Well, cool. All right. Well, we'll wrap this up. Good luck the rest of the year up the northern swing. You're right there. I think you're gonna.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll be following and rooting for you, buddy.
For sure.
Definitely.
Keep your fingers crossed, right?
That's right. And have a fun day tomorrow with your clients.
Having me.
Yeah,
we will. We always have a good time. Yeah.
It was good to meet you.
Take care, and I will talk to you soon.
All right, guys.
All right, guys. Y'all take care.
Bye.